So let's start by you telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into go karting.
My name's Corey, and I started basically by having. I always had an interest in karting, but Dad was the one that did all the research and found out, you know, a lot more about it. And then we eventually just went to our first race. We found a date. It was across the country, and we drove down there. The whole family drove down there, just to see how things were, try get involved in it and talk to people, learn things like that. And that's where we got numbers and people that we could contact. And eventually we found a club called Untitled Alleyne that we entered in and started racing. And we actually, from our day down Cork, it was, my dad got a mechanic's number, and our mechanic basically found a cart for us that paid for it, and then Dad bought it off him, and we basically started from there.
How much was the first cart?
Oh, the first cart was about €3,000.
So okay, so we said that the cart itself is going to will cost you £3,000, and obviously that was the cart itself. That wasn't the tires, that wasn't the suit, that wasn't the gloves or anything else. So
No.
I mean, Barry, I mean, you've come into you. Did you know that the cost before you started? You went embarked on this?
No,
you
didn't have any idea what anything cost.
Right. Was it a shock to you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I used to ride a motorbike anyway, so I bought leathers, I bought a helmet, so I know these things cost. I know that roughly they cost, but I knew we had to buy them. But no, it wasn't a shock. I knew that once we had the cart, we had to get the equipment and go from there.
Just so that our viewers can basically understand the cost implications of such a sport. You want to just give us a rough figure as to how much it cost you within that first year of him going go karting?
Maybe €5,000. I'd say 5,000.
And that was in comparison to what others were spending. How much you said that others were spending?
Oh gosh, more. Other people, I don't know, 10, 15, 20,000 euros.
Just take us back to what inspired you to basically go drive up to the racetrack in the first place.
Well, I was working. I had a great contract down in South London. I had that contract for a good few years. I made a decision to take a couple of years away from work, and during that time, I went back to Ireland. And during that time, I said to Corey, "Let's have a look at karting." In fact, it was something I think I said to you, if you'd done good at school, we'd have a go at it or something like that. I think that was the sort of carrot I dangled.
It couldn't have been that because I didn't do good at school.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure it was that, and you didn't do good at school anyway, so we did it anyway. But yeah, so look, I said to him, let's get involved in it. I was looking at Ireland. There wasn't a lot for him to do anyway because he doesn't follow ball sports like myself. He's kind of always involved in gaming and then driving or flying. So then we just got involved. I just done some research on the web, found a club, drove like a 4-hour drive to the bottom of Ireland just to watch a race weekend. And as Corey said, took some numbers, got some contact details. And pretty much when you go into the club websites, that's what it tells you to do anyway. It prompts you to just turn up, walk around, speak with people, ask questions and get a feel of what's going on. And we did exactly that. And we got the information we needed, and then spoke to another guy. He spoke to another guy. He spoke to another guy, and then that guy rang me, and then I had a good conversation with that guy, and then bang! Next minute, I got a text message. I found you a car.
Gotcha. And just talk us through, Corey, what it was like to actually go into your first race. How did you feel?
I basically my first race, it was my third or fourth ever time being in a competition car, and it was probably the worst conditions you could ever drive in. It was the hardest rain. You couldn't see a thing. Rivers in the track, essentially. People were, I mean, when you watch the first race go and stuff, you see the conditions of the track because you see people sliding off and things like that. But yeah, I just basically my goal for the day was don't crash, don't spin off, because I hadn't, I'd been able to tell by the previous times I was in the car that I wasn't going to make mistakes or anything like that. And I think in the entire day, I was the only driver not to spin off or have any sort of accident in the worst possible conditions. So that gave us a good jump start and a good slingshot into the rest of the season.
Okay, so you've done your first race meet now. So as a young boy of ethnic origin, how did you feel being there? Because I'm going to assume that the people, the parents, and the other drivers they didn't reflect your ethnic makeup. Would I be right in saying that?
We were the only family of ethnic background there. The first day, it actually took nearly a year to see another black family there. Yeah, full year until we seen another family of ethnic background. But it didn't really affect me, to be honest. Like when I walk into a room, I don't see anything different. I don't think I'm different unless someone points it out, obviously. So going to the track and being the only mixed driver, it didn't really affect me. If anything, it sort of pushed me because we all know Lewis Hamilton. We all know he's the only black F1 driver, and yeah, sort of pushed me because I knew there would be eyes on me for that reason. So I sort of used it as an advantage and just rolled with it.
So what did your mum think about you going into karting? Did she have any? Was she encouraging as well?
I would say I was encouraging, but encouraging in some sort of way, yeah. But obviously, as a mom and boys and their toys, they wouldn't be the most enthusiastic about it. So she was definitely scared and worried. But she was at my first race, and she was just like that. Everyone was happy to see me do what I love doing. So yeah, it was okay.
I just want to ask you about, when you got into this kart for the first time, because from what I understand of these things, they're kind of small inside, right? Just talk us through how you managed to adapt to that, being in such a rigid, confined position.
But it is definitely weird for the first time putting like a full face helmet on and your race suit, because you're already restricted once you get into a race suit and helmet anyway. So getting into a car is a whole other story, because I mean you pretty much can't move. There is no movement whatsoever. Your legs can't move, your body can't move. We're stuck to the seat. So yeah, it's definitely a weird experience, but I loved it.
What other driving experience had you had prior to going into go-karting?
Only I had a few times on leisure carts, you pay €50, you get in this big, massive leisure cart with all your friends and bang around the track. That was the only experience I had in a car. Well, it was still pretty good. I don't think I've ever been beaten by a friend or anything. So even from then, you could kind of tell like there might be a chance I'm a driver.
Rob, I think you mentioned, Corey, you said that it took a year before you saw any other black family, and now currently, what would you say the position in terms of ethnic minorities within the sport?
Well, the first time I arrived at the tracks in England, me and Dad actually were shocked to see the amount of different families there, from all corners of the planet. But it certainly wasn't 50-50, but there was a massive increase in families of ethnic backgrounds, you know, and it was good to see.
And young girls racing as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Mm.
From various backgrounds as well. Quite a few young girls. And when I say young, I'd say about 8 to 12, that kind of age group.
You started with your cart that was £3,000, and plus the other adding on the cost. I think Dad said it was about £5,000 in total. And so where are you now in the sport?
Right now, I still live here in Ireland, but I race in the Danny Ricciardo series. It's backed and sponsored by the F1 driver Danny Ricciardo, and you know I travel over there once or twice a month and compete. Yeah, it's definitely a massive step up from where I was in my first year. You know, it was a big jump, but I was willing to take it, and yeah, it seemed all right.
Dad, the progression that Corey's made from the age of 16 until now, he's 18. Would you say that's typical for the sport, or would you say that Corey is a little bit exceptional?
Well, I think race 3, which was one of the most exciting races I've ever seen in terms of racing. You know, Corey was basically competing with. Sorry, race 2.
It was the second ever race.
Right, his second ever race he's done, which was at a track called F-Boy. And he was basically competing with the championship, or one of the championship holders. It was one of the most exciting races of the day. It was one of the most exciting races I've ever seen. And there was one comment specifically throughout the whole day. Corey's driving was unbelievable. And I was standing by a sort of chain link fence, and a guy, I mean, I didn't know anyone there other than the driver and Corey and the club owner. And one guy came up to me, tapped me on the shoulder, and I looked around, and he says, excuse me. And he says, is that your lad over there? And I said, yeah. And he said, you know what? He said, your lad's just done what your lad has just done. It's taken my lad 5 years to do, he said. So, you know, that was really encouraging, because what you've got to remember as well is Corey was a novice. So every race he started, he had to start from plumb last, every single race. And his second race, he was running second. That's after overtaking eight other drivers in no time at all. So straight away, Corey caught everybody's eye.
So Corey, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Even if I wasn't in motorsport, I probably couldn't even answer that question. But I mean, in motorsport, it's really hard to predict. So, I mean, you can only really prepare for what's coming right ahead. You know, I'm preparing right now for my next race. And, you know, once I finish that race, then you go prepare for the next one, things like that. Because there's nothing to tell you what's going to happen in a year's time or even half a year's time. So you just got to take it as it comes.
Have you actually had any bad injuries since you've been in the sport?
Well, on my first year, actually, the first ever day I won a race, I was winning every single race in the day. I won the last race. I was in first, but it was actually finished early. Then it was restarted, and on that restart, on the last lap, the last race of the day, I actually had the biggest crashes I've ever seen in karting. I didn't have any like broken bones or anything. I just did a really bad concussion. You know, I have no memory of the entire day, bar like a few things in the morning that came back over time. You know, this is over 2 years ago now, and I've only recently this year started getting memories from that morning. So yeah, it was a pretty bad head injury.
That would, I would assume, change your whole mindset about the sport. So what made you get back into the kart again?
Mainly just belief in what I could do, and you know, it mainly came from the start of the season. You know, like Dad said, race 2, and that very day actually was probably the thing that pushed me to get back in, because I was completely at the top. You know, winning. You know, it was such a weird experience. You know, and yeah, it was basically the fact that I knew I had what it takes, or what it took to win, because I had showed it on that day. Even though I had such a bad crash, I still believed in my ability.
you might not have shared it with him at the time, but was you worried about him going back into the car after this accident?
Yeah, I was worried because that was a major. It was a massive shock, and I'd never ever thought of him crashing up until that point. I had no concept of these guys can crash. I just knew, they just go around the track, we load back in the van and go home. So there was no conversations about accidents. So yeah, it was a massive. I'm trying to get over it personally, but what we spoke to Corey's uncle, who again gave us good advice, and again, you can get hurt playing football, you can get hurt playing tennis, you get hurt doing anything. So yeah, it was an eye opener, so that we had to change our approach to say, look, make sure you're comfortable with everything you're doing, and then get on and do it. So it takes a mindset. It's probably not dissimilar to boxing. Once you're in the ring and that bell goes, you can't walk out. You've got to get on with it. So that there's a very hard element to racing, which a lot of people don't. Well, I don't know if they acknowledge it or not, but there is that point that you've got to get over.
Just wanted to talk a little bit about when you were in Cork, when you first started to race. If you could just kind of like explain, was there a ranking system or was there a point system that was that would determine the ranking or the level of the different drivers?
Well, there was nothing really that shows you the skill of the drivers bar the championship. So we knew who came first, second, and third in the previous year's championship. So after the second race, those were our targets, not the actual positions in the championship. We actually said going into the championship that, there was no specific goal, as in, like, I wasn't told you need to be fifth, you need to be sixth. It was just sort of, we'll see what happens. But then, as we've seen, I was better than the guys who had even won last year. That then became goal on the race day, was just beat them. I was able to do it. I'd done it most of the time, out on track. And yeah, that was just the goal. But
this particular circuit that's been set up, sponsored by Daniel Ricciardo, did you have to be at a certain level before you were accepted, or is there a particular pathway that you have to take in order for you to enter into this level of go-karting?
Well, for me in particular, since I had a year's experience prior to starting over in England, they said they would evaluate me on like the first race and go from there. And obviously they had no issues with the way I was driving, so they basically said, right, it's fine. It was almost like a test. It was a little test, all they had to do was look at me, make sure I was safe, wasn't causing anyone danger, and they were all fine.
What kind of training do you have to do in order to maintain your ability?
Yeah. Well, main thing is the neck. The neck is the most important thing for any racing driver in any category. The neck is the main thing you need to train, because the main part about racing is you're going around corners, and when going around corners, if you think of when you're in the passenger seat in a car and someone speeds around a corner, let's say it's a right corner, you get thrown to the left-hand side of the car. So if you can imagine, we are pretty much stuck to the car, our seats, measured to us, so we can't actually move. Yeah. So when we go around these corners, the only thing that's exposed is our neck. So it's the only thing that can move. So our necks basically need to be strong enough to resist the force of gravity, which can be up to 3 times, which is basically when we hit the corner and turn in, our head gets 3 times its weight going in the opposite direction of the corner. So you just need to be strong enough to be able to hold that up. And then obviously, once you're able to do that, you then it comes your arm strength, your biceps, forearms, and triceps, because you're obviously turning the steering wheel at high speeds, things like that. And then just having your abs and, chest, your core all strong as well helps a lot too.
So I just want to take us through like a race day, from early in the morning, preparing, getting yourself ready for race. Take us through what a race day would be like.
Well, we'll most likely be waking up in a hotel. I'll go for my shower. Shower as always. Get
How long
dressed.
do you shower
Bring all my too long. It's like a sauna.
45 minutes,
Way
roughly.
too long.
Yeah.
Way too long. But yeah, guess you can clear your mind and then you just get out. All my stuff would be in the van, ready packed. We just hop in the van, grab food, go to the track. Once at the track, all we do is unload all the equipment, marquee, the stand for the car, all your tires, tools. Dad'll obviously pull out all his tools and stuff, and I'll pull out all my gear, get it on eventually. And yeah, basically then in a race weekend, the first thing you would be doing would be going for your first practice. So you just walk to the grid. All your competitors walk to the grid, the people in your class, drop the cart down, and you're just waiting for the signal to go out on track. And then we all got on track for the first time. And sort of that's when you get your first feel of the track, the drivers, the conditions, It's the point at which you pretty much decide the rest of your weekend on.
So you wouldn't really plan a race strategy until you've done like your first practice lap and figure out the track and
that's
various little tactical things.
That's when it starts. Okay. Yeah,
All right.
I mean the most I can do, because I'm really inexperienced compared to some drivers. I race with drivers that have more experience in a go-kart than I have experience in life. They've been driving 18 years. I've been driving 3, so they obviously they have a good advantage when it comes to race strategy, things like that. That's the main thing, race strategy. So the second we go out, we'll know the weather forecast basically for the weekend, and we can decide on that. But once we go out, the first thing we get to go, I get control of is tire pressures, tire temperatures, because you really need to be on top of those in a race weekend, because tires are the only part of the car that touches the ground. So I would say they're the most important, that and the engine. So that's the main things we get to work on, is just going flat out in practice and then coming back, reading your temperatures of the tire and then adjusting it constantly every time we come in.
And you mentioned there about the tires. So I would assume that when you watch Formula One, people like Lewis Hamilton, they barely touch their car. They've got like 3-4 mechanics checking over all the finer detail. And your dad and the other mechanic would definitely have to contribute a lot more. So mechanically, what are you responsible for on the race day?
Oh, well, it'd mainly just be the tires, because Dad doesn't have any background in racing. So if I could tell him something about the tires, and he'll just look at me and think, well, what do you want me to do about it then? So I am the one that checks the tire pressures, checks the temperatures. I put the pressure in the tire. I know what it's at, and I know what it comes in at, because it gains pressure over time. So that's how I take my readings. And then if I need to adjust them, I'll take pressure out, I'll put pressure in, or if I even need to actually move the tires, I can change the setup, like the geometry of the tires. I can do that too. That's mainly my role.
I wanted to ask you, Corey, about your diet. Do you have to have a specific diet?
Yeah, well, I actually eat less on race weekend, just because if you can imagine eating food before you go on a roller coaster, that's not going to end up very good. So it's kind of like that, on practice day and race day, the food I'm eating isn't anywhere near the amount I'm eating normally. But when it comes to diet, I have a probably above average diet. It's not terrible, but it could be better. But it doesn't hinder me in any way. I'm lucky I have good genetics, so as long as I'm staying in the gym, I'm going to be physically fit. The food I eat doesn't have much of an effect on me.
So you eat like probably a regular person. There isn't anything specific that you would eat in order to, I don't know, give you the energy whilst racing.
No, nothing specific. There's nothing specific. Just high carbs, protein, things like that. Not a lot of fat food. Not putting extra salt in my food. Not eating out every day. Things like that, just to keep a healthy diet. But it wouldn't be extreme. Like I'm not going vegan or anything anytime soon. So
I know, Barry, that you have been, you and some of the other parents have tried to contact Lewis Hamilton. Do you want to just tell the viewers a little bit about the reason why you've contacted Lewis Hamilton?
Yeah, well, because of recent, we've seen a larger uptake of Black families and Asian families involved in motorsport. And, I consciously thought, well, it's a big, we're contributing a fair amount personally to the sport on the overall, and that we should get some recognition and something in return of that gain. And because of what's happening in terms of, America, BLM, Black Lives Matter, George Floyd and everything else, and all these companies coming out now and saying that they need to do more in terms of supporting everybody else on the planet. So I made a conscious decision to me and two other fathers to draft a letter and send it to Mercedes and say to them, look, we want to start some sort of foundation to support the young entrants going into motorsport. And, it's also based on the fact that we're all involved in karting, but also these entrants want to have other involvements in the motorsport. So we drafted a really good letter. It's gone out last week. I said to the other parents, what we'll do is we'll keep sending the letter until we get some form of response. And motorsport in particular, especially Formula One's, is in a massive problem because its viewership is basically reducing. And Sky and all the big guns who sponsor it, they're in a position because the volume of people that used to watch it don't watch the sport anymore, and the sport's not as exciting as a karting track race. So, as I said to another one of the fathers, the possibility is that the level of engagement is just a small group of society, because only a small group of society take part. And as with NFL and the Premiership and gymnastics, gymnastics, you've got Simone Biles. You look at she's off the scale in terms of what she's doing in gymnastics. What she's doing in gymnastics now has never been done before. Look what Lewis Hamilton. There have been I watched a documentary the other day. There have been 794 drivers in F1, and only one of them is black, and that's Lewis Hamilton. And only he has done what he has achieved in motorsport, and no one else has done it.
But what kind of advice would you be given to anyone who's watching who said, you know what, I fancy doing this? Where do I start?
The whole idea of the charity is, look, I've bought a car. I've had to buy specific tools, which I can use for the van, for anything. But there's other specialist equipment. You've got helmet, race suits. Again, that stuff's bought and paid for. If someone else wants to come and have a go at it, I've got this equipment to say, well, look, here you go. You can use that. I think all we have to offer, and this is what I've said to the other families who are involved with this charity that we're setting up now, is I've got 3 years of experience in this karting at the moment. Corey's got 3 years of driver ability, which he can share with the younger drivers. And I must admit, in year one, a lot of the drivers who saw Corey when we actually attended that track were in awe of him. The reason being that they correlated Corey to Lewis Hamilton, and they were very, they were in awe of him. They would always come and say hello. They would engage with him. So Corey's got that to offer, and he's got that to give back, and he's also got natural ability, so he can talk to other younger drivers and say, look, try this, try that, think of this, think of that, and do this and do that. So the aim of the charity basically is to say to people, look, we're involved. If you want to find out more, come to us, speak with us. If you want to test, I've got the equipment. We won't charge you. We'll give you a go. Obviously, we'll we'll sort of limit how it works because it's expensive kit and you can't just, it has to be treated a certain way. So we'll give the advice, we'll give guidance, and we've got stuff that we can say to someone, look, if you want to have a go, come, sit down in the kart, start it up. You don't necessarily have to go racing off at it, and come to a racetrack, come to a race meeting and see what it entails.
And Corey, what advice would you give to any young person wanting to go into the sport?
Well, the main thing is just stay motivated. That's the main message I can tell anyone who wanted to or wants to be a driver, especially because like in loads of sports, you have good days and you have bad days. But unlike a lot of sports, you are the driver and it's all on you. So it can get a bit hectic, on a good day you can feel really big headed and bad things can happen. And on a bad day you can feel really down and think, nah, I'm not gonna do this again. So you just really gotta stay strong. Because if you believe you can do something, you will put in the work to make sure that happens. I want to win a race. I told myself I'm going to win a race. So it's going to happen. I believe I can do it. I believe I have talent to be able to do it. So, just staying motivated. Even I might not get a win tomorrow, even the next day, but making sure I stay motivated is my number one goal. I live in Ireland, thousands of kilometers away from the track or my cart or anything, and I still need to manage to keep it in my mind and stay motivated to get up, go to the gym, cycle, things like that, and just stay active, which can be hard at times, but yeah, you just got to push through it.
And just lastly, if anybody wants to get in touch with either of you, how do they do that?
You can send me an email for the minute. My email is pbcallane@gmail.com. That's Papa Bravo Charlie Alpha Lima Lima Echo Yankee November Echo @gmail.com, or you can just drop me a text on 07956 907745 and we'll share what we've got.
And you, Corey?
My Instagram is just my name, Corey_Alleyne 02 COREY_ALLEYNE 02.
We thank you for coming on tonight and we wish you all the best.